Before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, drop a comment on what you'd do if you faced an alien apex predator, and subscribe for more epic humanity yes stories. Now let's begin. The Galactic Council chamber was vast enough to cradle a moon. Rows upon rows of floating thrones gleamed in dim blue light, each holding a representative of a species that claimed dominion over some corner of the galaxy. Their voices did not echo, for the chamber absorbed sound the way a predator swallowed prey, yet the tension inside was unbearable. Even the most ancient races shifted uneasily, because something unthinkable had happened. The apex predator, the beast that entire civilizations feared to name, had slipped its bonds. The Valix representative, a serpent-bodied elder whose translucent scales pulsed with agitation, coiled tighter around its throne. We must not underestimate this. The last time the creature roamed free, it left 5 colonies in ruin. Our hunters bled rivers and still failed to contain it. Across from him, a hulking Zoran warlord pounded his plated chest in defiance. Deploy fleets. Blast the entire sector. Burn the world it hides on. End this nightmare before it spreads again. But even the Zoran's warborn bluster faltered under the memory of what the predator had done to their kind centuries ago. The apex was not simply strong. It was cunning. It turned traps into weapons, stalked hunters as prey, and fought with the patience of an immortal. For countless species, it was death given form. And now, it was loose again. A younger voice spoke. Thin, nervous, yet insistent. Archivist Reldar of the Jalari species floated forward, his membranous wings trembling. My lords, my ladies, the concern is not only that the predator has escaped. Our most recent satellite sweeps indicate its spoor is near human territory. The chamber erupted in scandalized murmurs. The word human always carried with it a strange weight. An upstart race, barely out of their atmosphere a few centuries ago, yet notorious for their reckless courage. They colonized death worlds without hesitation. They thrived where no other species bothered to settle. And above all, they had a maddening habit of treating every crisis as if it were sport. The Valix elder hissed. Do not jest. The humans are unpredictable enough without this monster near them. It is no jest, Reldar replied, pulling up a hololithic display. Grainy images shimmered above the chamber. A forest world, thick with fog, its canopy trembling with movement. The faint heat signature of the apex predator slithered across the scan. But there was something more. A second signature, humanoid, alive, walking near the beast. The Zoran warlord narrowed his luminous eyes. Impossible. No one walks beside that nightmare and lives. Yet the data remained. 2 signatures. The predator and a man. The council fell into sharp debate. Some demanded extermination fleets. Others urged capture, fearful of what might happen if the predator bonded with a lesser species. The chamber threatened to dissolve into violence until the chancellor, a 6-eyed being of the Irix dominion, raised a clawed hand for silence. Speculation gains us nothing. We will send hunters to investigate. If the predator has indeed wandered into human lands, then it must be eliminated, along with any who harbor it. We will not risk contagion. The word contagion hung like smoke. To these ancient races, the very idea that death itself might bond with another was a sickness, a perversion of the natural order. But the hololith remained, flickering with stubborn truth, a man-shaped figure moving beside the terror of worlds. Far from the council's chamber, the frontier world of Orphean 9 slumbered beneath a broken sky. Its forests were wild and old, branches tangled like the ribs of ancient beasts, and its nights whispered with predators that had no names. Most colonists stayed close to the settlement walls. Only fools, or men like Elias Kane, ventured beyond. Elias crouched beside his campfire, rough hands steady as he cleaned his blade. The day's hunt had been thin, and the alien sun was dipping into a crimson haze. He adjusted the strap of his weathered rifle and listened. Out here, silence was never real. The forest breathed, shifted, hid things. He'd learned long ago that if you heard nothing, something dangerous was already watching. Tonight something was. The first time he'd seen it, Elias had nearly emptied his rifle into the shadows. A monster out of nightmare, black as midnight, eyes burning like coals. He'd expected to die in that instant. But instead of striking, the beast had stumbled, dragging a poisoned wound through the undergrowth. And in that hesitation, in that breathless second, Elias had made a choice. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the marine training, that instinct to help the wounded. Maybe it was the loneliness of years spent scouting empty frontier worlds. Or maybe it was something older, something human, the refusal to bow to fear. He'd treated its wound. Offered it fire. Even cooked meat, though the thing's fangs could shear steel. He remembered speaking to it, half out of nerves, half out of madness. "Guess you're my pet now, huh?" The predator had not struck him down. Instead, it had lowered its massive head, eyes half-lidded, and remained by the fire. Now, as the council argued in far-off space, Elias reached into his pack and tossed a strip of dried meat toward the shadows. The massive shape shifted, a low rumble like distant thunder rolling from its chest. Then it moved closer, talons sinking into soil, and devoured the offering with a predator's grace. Elias smirked to himself. "Yeah, Shadowfang. Knew you'd like that." In the dark canopy above, alien satellites watched. Their images streamed back to the council fleets, revealing a sight no one had ever imagined. The apex predator lying near a human campfire, its massive form curled like a hound at rest. And the human, calm as if this were nothing more than a hunting trip, spoke to it like a friend. The Valix elder recoiled at the image, voice trembling with fury. "This cannot be allowed. The beast must be destroyed and the human with it. Before others see this blasphemy." Yet across the chamber, a few silent counselors said nothing. For all their fear, for all their posturing, they could not tear their eyes from the impossible image. On Orpheon 9, Elias leaned back against a log, rifle across his knees, predator at his side. The fire crackled low, embers rising into the alien night. He exhaled and muttered under his breath. "They're watching, you know. They don't understand your mind now." The predator's eyes glowed softly in the dark. It gave no reply but the steady sound of its breathing. And in the silence of the forest, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. The fire had burned low, reduced to glowing embers that pulsed in rhythm with Elias Kane's slow breathing. His eyes stayed open, listening as the beast beside him shifted its weight. Even in repose, the predator radiated danger. Its muscles rippled under midnight hide, its breathing heavy enough to stir the dirt. The galaxy called it death incarnate, but to Elias it was simply there, breathing the same air, sharing the same fire. He had learned quickly that the creature was not mindless rage. Its movements were deliberate, cautious, calculated. When it hunted, it did not crash through the forest like a brute. It moved with silence that made Elias's skin crawl. Yet when Elias spoke, the beast tilted its massive head as though the words carried meaning. It understood tone if not language. In the early days after their first meeting, Elias had tested boundaries. He had placed food within reach, then sat back, rifle ready. The predator had waited, eyes locked on him, until Elias gestured, pushing the strip of cooked meat closer. Only then had the beast leaned in and taken it gently, careful not to brush his hand with its fangs. That single moment convinced Elias this was no accident. Something deeper was at work. He'd named it Shadowfang the next night, half in jest. To his surprise, the creature seemed to accept it, responding to the sound with a low rumble that was neither threat nor dismissal. In time it began to follow him through the forest. Not always close, not always visible, but there, haunting the edges of his world, never striking. Elias Kane was not a man easily shaken. Years in the Marines had carved patience into him, tempered by blood and mud on worlds no one remembered. After mustering out, he'd sought silence, signing contracts as a surveyor on the frontier. Orpheon 9 had offered just that: isolation, long hunts, and the kind of quiet where a man could hear his own heartbeat. What he hadn't expected was companionship. Certainly not from the deadliest thing the galaxy had ever feared. Still he spoke to it. Around the fire, when loneliness pressed too hard, he told stories from campaigns, from boyhood, even from drunken nights on colonies that smelled of rust and rain. He didn't expect replies, but the weight of its gaze was answer enough. In a strange way, the beast anchored him more than any human squad ever had. What Elias didn't know was that others watched. Hunters from the council had already landed, cloaked in technology beyond human reach. They crouched on ridgelines, lenses focused, transmitting every gesture back to orbit. Their orders were clear: eliminate the predator. But orders had never included this impossible tableau of a man and monster coexisting. Within his tent, Elias sharpened his blade by habit. Outside, Shadowfang prowled the edge of the camp, a silent guardian. The forest respected the beast. Lesser predators fled its scent, leaving Elias in peace. For the first time in years he slept without keeping one eye open. On the third morning the bond was tested. Elias had ranged farther than usual, following tracks of game. He came upon a clearing where the air shimmered unnaturally. The snap of a branch, the faint ripple in the undergrowth, ambush. His instincts screamed before his mind caught up. He dived aside just as a net of searing plasma hissed down, scarring the soil where he'd stood. Hunters revealed themselves, towering reptilian forms clad in armor that bent the light. Elias's rifle snapped up, his old training kicking in, but he knew the odds. Their weapons were sleek, lethal, designed for extermination. Then the forest exploded. Shadowfang burst from the shadows with a roar that seemed to shake the sky. One hunter was crushed under its weight before his weapon discharged. Another tried to rise, only to be flung like broken kindling against a tree. The survivors scattered, their composure shattered. This was not the predator they'd studied from afar. It was worse, smarter, fighting not for territory but for someone. Elias fired in the chaos, precise bursts that dropped a fleeing soldier. He hadn't asked for this fight, but survival was second nature. When the last hunter vanished into the trees, wounded and terrified, the clearing fell still save for the sound of Shadowfang's ragged breathing. The beast turned, muzzle smeared with alien blood, and fixed its eyes on him. Elias should have felt fear. Instead, he saw something else, expectation, almost question. He lowered his rifle, exhaled slowly, and gave a short nod. Good boy. The predator's rumble was softer this time. Almost pleased. By nightfall, Elias had pieced together enough from scraps of tech left behind. Whoever those soldiers were, they hadn't come for him. They had come for Shadowfang. Which meant the council knew. Which meant more would follow. He sat by the fire again, predator at his side, and spoke into the night. They're not going to stop, you know. They'll come again harder. But if you're with me, then maybe we've got a shot. Shadowfang stretched out beside him, massive head lowering near his boots, a mountain of muscle at rest. Elias smiled grimly. The counselors in their pristine chambers would never understand this. They only knew cages and chains. But here, in the wild, the deadliest creature in the galaxy had chosen to stay by a man's fire. In orbit, the hunters reviewed their losses, shaken to their cores. Their transmissions relayed everything: the ambush, the slaughter, the wordless bond. They had witnessed loyalty where there should have been none. Some whispered heresy, that perhaps the human had tamed the untamable. Others insisted it was impossible. Yet the evidence glowed before them, undeniable. The council would have to decide soon. Down below, Elias reached to toss another strip of dried meat toward the beast. Shadowfang caught it neatly, jaws closing with terrifying grace. Elias chuckled once under his breath. Guess you really are my pet now. The flames cracked. The forest hushed. And beyond the sky, entire civilizations trembled at the thought that it might be true. The forest no longer felt like a sanctuary. Elias Kane had survived ambushes before, but now every shadow carried menace. He moved with the patience of a predator himself, checking traps, brushing soil to obscure tracks, never sleeping longer than a few minutes at a time. The hunters had tested him once and failed, but failure only guaranteed their return. He could almost hear their whispers in the tree-line, disciplined voices plotting in a language he did not understand. Shadowfang prowled with him, senses sharper than any sensor array. The beast bristled whenever faint electromagnetic pulses rippled through the undergrowth, signals from cloaked drones. When Elias shifted his rifle to a firing stance, Shadowfang mirrored him, crouched low, fangs bared at invisible enemies. It was a strange symmetry, a man and monster moving like parts of the same machine. At dawn he found proof of their persistence. A trap snapped shut where he had set a decoy trail, a lattice of plasma thorns designed to cut anything caught inside into ribbons. The device hissed and sparked, failing to find flesh. Elias crouched, studied it, then whistled low. They're learning. He dismantled the trap with steady hands, pocketing components. Knowledge was ammunition, and he would use theirs against them. The hunters came again by midday. This time they moved as a pack, a dozen armored silhouettes encircling his camp. Elias had known they were coming. He'd left the fire smoldering with his jacket draped over a rock to mimic his form. When the hunters burst from the foliage, weapons raised, they fired into an illusion. That moment of confusion was all he needed. Shadowfang erupted from a trench Elias had dug near the perimeter. The predator's roar was a living weapon, stunning the intruders. Elias opened fire from high ground, each shot deliberate, aimed for joints and optics. 2 hunters fell, armor sparking. Another screamed as Shadowfang's claws shredded plating like paper. They regrouped quickly, disciplined, furious. Energy bolts seared trees, and one caught Elias across the shoulder, spinning him into the dirt. Pain flared, sharp and hot, but he gritted his teeth, rolling into cover. Shadowfang howled, a sound that seemed to shake the leaves from the trees, then hurled itself into their line to shield him. Elias pulled himself up, blood soaking his sleeve, and spat grit. He had learned something vital in those seconds. They weren't just trying to kill the beast. Their fire had targeted him too. He was no longer collateral. He was a threat. The skirmish ended in retreat. Half the hunters lay dead or maimed, and the survivors pulled back with brutal efficiency. Shadowfang padded back to Elias, hide streaked with ichor, eyes burning with an unearthly glow. Elias leaned against a tree, clutching his wound, and laughed once, bitter and low. "Guess we're in this together, partner. They want you dead. And me with you." In orbit, the commanders reviewed their hunters' feeds in disbelief. A single human, armed with only primitive tools, had resisted their elite twice. Worse still, the Predator fought with him for him as though bound by some unseen pact. Debate split the ranks. Some demanded an orbital strike to vaporize the entire forest. Others argued this bond must be studied. If humanity could tame what none had ever mastered, then the balance of power across the stars had shifted forever. Back on Orpheon 9, Elias dragged himself to his camp, stitched his wound with shaking hands, and considered his dwindling options. He was one man against a fleet. Running would change nothing. The council would never stop hunting. They feared what he represented, perhaps more than they feared Shadowfang itself. He set his jaw, cleaned his rifle, and prepared for the next wave. That night the sky glowed red. Ships descended, their engines burning scars into the horizon. Elias stood in the clearing, Shadowfang at his side, and felt the earth tremble. The council had escalated. They weren't sending hunters anymore. They were sending war. The first bombardment struck miles away, flattening swaths of forest. The second drew closer, a wall of fire devouring trees. Animals fled in terror, a stampede of claws and wings. Amid the chaos, Elias didn't flinch. He gripped his rifle, eyes steady, heart hammering with something colder than fear. Shadowfang pressed close, enormous frame shielding him from falling ash. Through the smoke, armored figures advanced, more numerous than before. Their weapons glowed, hungry for blood. The commander's voice boomed from a translator device, harsh and metallic. "Human, you have allied with corruption. Surrender and your death will be swift. Resist, and both you and the beast will be erased from existence." Elias spat into the dirt, chambered around, and raised his weapon. "You'll have to try." The clearing erupted in war. Shadowfang moved like a storm, tearing into lines of soldiers, scattering them with impossible speed. Elias struck with precision, each shot breaking their formation. But the numbers were endless, the fire raining from the skies relentless. The forest burned around them, smoke clawing at the stars. Still they fought. Man and Predator back to back, defying a galaxy. When the second wave fell back, dragging their wounded, the clearing was a graveyard. Elias knelt, exhausted, coughing on smoke. Shadowfang limped, blood streaking its flank, yet its eyes never left the sky. Above, the ships shifted, preparing for another strike. This time it would not be a skirmish. It would be annihilation. Elias wiped soot from his face and stared upward, jaw clenched. "They're going to burn the whole damn world just to stop us." Shadowfang growled, low and steady, a sound like the promise of violence. Together, they stood in the ruins of the forest, firelight dancing on steel and foam. The hunters above watched the feed, silent, shaken by what they had witnessed. This was no alliance of convenience. It was loyalty. It was friendship. A bond that made mockery of everything the council believed immutable. In the council chambers light years away, debate erupted into chaos. Some demanded extermination. Others whispered of possibility, of opportunity. The galaxy's deadliest predator had chosen a man. What did that make the man? On the ground, Elias raised his rifle again as fire fell from the heavens. He was ready. Whatever came next, he and Shadowfang would face it together. The night sky blazed and the forest shook with the fury of gods. Smoke clung to Elias Kane's lungs as the bombardment ended. The forest around him was no longer forest at all but a wasteland of ash and fire. Shadowfang stood at his side, chest heaving, body streaked with blood both alien and its own. The beast had fought until the last hunter fled. Now silence pressed down, broken only by the crackle of burning timber. Then the silence shattered. Light descended from the sky, white and merciless. It wasn't fire this time but containment. Energy webs dropped in a lattice that scorched the earth and pinned Shadowfang where it stood. The predator roared, thrashing, claws tearing into glowing restraints, but each struggle drew only more chains from orbit. Elias raised his rifle, firing into the nets, but the weapon was a child's toy against that level of technology. Elias Kane, A voice boomed from the heavens, translated and cold. You are taken into custody by order of the Galactic Council. Resist and you will be annihilated along with your beast. He knew the fight was over. His rifle clicked dry, his body shook with exhaustion, and Shadowfang's struggles weakened as the nets constricted. Elias lowered his weapon slowly. Easy boy, he muttered, hand brushing the beast's scorched hide. We're not done yet. Just playing the long game. They were dragged skyward in cages of light, swallowed into the belly of a waiting cruiser. The interior was sterile, humming with power, crawling with guards who gave Elias a wide berth. None dared approach Shadowfang directly, though it lay bound and weakened. Its burning eyes followed every movement, and the guard's fear was palpable. Elias felt it too, but not toward the predator. His fear was for what came next. The journey to the capital was long enough for his thoughts to harden. He replayed each choice, feeding the beast, fighting beside it, refusing surrender, and realized there was no undoing them now. Humanity's name was already etched into whatever history the Council would write about this. When the ship finally dropped out of fold space, Elias braced himself. The galactic capital was no mere city. It was a construct wrapped around a star, a sprawl of silver towers and artificial seas that shimmered across entire orbits. From his cage Elias glimpsed it through narrow slits, a civilization that believed itself eternal. Yet even eternal things trembled, and he would soon learn why. The council chamber dwarfed even imagination. Elias was marched into its heart, chains at his wrists, Shadowfang hauled in separate bindings that required 6 shimmering pylons of force to hold. Thousands of eyes, compound, faceted, luminous, turned as one toward the human and his beast. Whispers spread through the gathered species like fire through dry grass. No one had expected this sight. No one had expected them alive. The Chancellor of the Irix Dominion rose, 6 eyes narrowing. His voice carried without amplification. Elias Kane. You stand accused of harboring, weaponizing, and corrupting the apex predator. Speak, if you have words, before judgment is rendered. Elias looked up at the tears of alien faces, unflinching. Weaponizing? You've been trying to kill this creature for centuries. All I did was feed it. Treat it like more than a target. And it chose to stay. That's not corruption. That's trust. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The word hung in the air like a forbidden spell. Trust. No one spoke of trust when discussing the predator. It was supposed to be chaos given form, incapable of loyalty. Yet here was a human daring to claim otherwise. The Valix elder coiled tighter, voice sharp as broken glass. Blasphemy. You call the annihilation of worlds your companion? You dare dress horror as kinship? Elias's lip twitched in a humorless smile. Kinship's your word, not mine. I call him my pet. The chamber erupted in pandemonium. Some counselors screeched in outrage, others muttered in disbelief, and a few sat silent, staring with something close to awe. The predator shifted against its bonds at the noise, and Shadowfang's guttural snarl silenced even the loudest voices. Guards rushed forward, weapons crackling, but Elias stepped toward the edge of his tether and raised a hand. Easy. His voice was calm, the same tone he used by campfires. Shadowfang stilled instantly, its massive frame sinking into a crouch, eyes fixed only on him. The silence afterward was heavier than any roar. The guards froze, then backed away, visibly shaken. Counselors whispered among themselves. How could a simple human word halt what no fleet had ever controlled? The Chancellor's tone wavered despite his authority. You claim this creature obeys you? Elias shook his head. Not obeys. Listens. There's a difference. That distinction unsettled them more than anything. To obey was to be broken. To listen was to choose. The implication coiled through every mind in the chamber. The predator had chosen him. Debate fractured the assembly. Some demanded immediate execution, terrified that humanity had unlocked a power beyond their control. Others pressed for study, arguing that a new era of galactic order might begin if this bond could be replicated. The floor threatened to collapse into chaos until the Chancellor raised his hand again. Enough. The Council will deliberate. Until then, the human and his beast will remain under guard. If what he claims is true, we will test it. If it is false, his death will serve as warning to his kind. Elias allowed the guards to drag him back. He kept his eyes locked on Shadowfang's, silently reassuring. The predator's breathing slowed, its rage cooling at his presence. In those moments Elias understood what unsettled the council most. It wasn't that he had survived. It wasn't that he had fought them. It was that the galaxy's nightmare had chosen calm in his company, as if humanity's fire had given it peace. Later, alone in a cell lined with energy fields, Elias sat with bruised hands and a burning shoulder wound, replaying the trial in his head. They were afraid of him, but not because of what he'd done. They were afraid of what it meant. Humanity was already notorious for surviving the impossible. If a man could call the universe's deadliest predator his pet, then maybe humanity wasn't reckless after all. Maybe it was dangerous in ways the council had never calculated. Above the city, in a cavernous hangar, Shadowfang paced within its bindings, eyes fixed on the horizon. It did not thrash now. It did not roar. It waited. And those who watched shivered at the realization that it waited not for freedom, but for a man. The council prepared their test. Elias had barely slept when the guards came for him. Their armor gleamed under the artificial sun of the capital, weapons humming low with threat, but not one of them would meet his eyes. They shackled him without a word, marching him through corridors of polished metal that reverberated with his footsteps. He wasn't afraid of what was coming, at least not for himself. His fear was reserved for Shadowfang. The council wanted proof, and proof to them meant forcing his companion into slaughter. The arena they led him to was older than the council itself. Hollowed from an asteroid, it had witnessed millennia of blood sport and judgment. A coliseum of alien design, its walls shimmered with containment fields and its tiers overflowed with beings of every shape. The roar of the crowd was not celebratory, it was hungry. They wanted to see if the myth was true, if the predator could be tamed, and if not, they longed for Elias's death. He was thrust into the center, chains released, his body dwarfed by the vast floor. Above, in a cage of force, Shadowfang waited, bound but unbroken. Its golden eyes never strayed from him, and when the restraints fell, the predator hit the ground with a shuddering impact that echoed across the arena. Gasps rippled as it rose to its full height, hide scarred from past battles, breath curling in smoke. From the highest seat, the chancellor's voice boomed. The human claims dominion over the apex predator. Today that claim will be tested. If he fails, both will be erased from existence. The first test was cruelly simple. Gates opened, and a horde of engineered beasts poured forth. Hulking brutes with claws like obsidian, serpentine creatures with acid dripping from their maws, constructs bred for war and spectacle. They circled Elias, but none dared approach until Shadowfang loosed a roar that rattled the bones of every being present. The engineered beasts faltered, but then hunger and command drove them forward. Elias didn't shout orders. He didn't wave his arms. He simply moved, fluid and fearless, weaving between strikes, drawing their attention with calm precision. Shadowfang mirrored him as if tethered by thought, intercepting every creature that lunged too close. Its claws tore through engineered hides, its jaws snapped bone and metal alike. Where Elias ducked, Shadowfang struck. Where Elias struck, Shadowfang shielded. The crowd had expected carnage, but what they witnessed was choreography, a man and predator moving as one. Within minutes the sand was slick with ichor. The last of the engineered beasts writhed, torn apart, and Shadowfang stood over them, chest heaving but eyes still locked on Elias. Not on the fallen, not on the crowd, only him. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some screamed for execution, terrified of the bond they had just witnessed. Others shouted for study, awed by the impossible. Elias raised his voice above them, raw but steady. "Do you see? He isn't my weapon. He isn't my slave. He's my partner. You've spent centuries trying to kill him because you couldn't understand him. Maybe you feared he'd never listen. But he listened to me because I treated him like more than a monster." The council hesitated. The chancellor signaled again. The second test began. A new gate opened but nothing came out. Instead, the arena floor shimmered, and suddenly the containment field around Shadowfang flared into life, cutting Elias off from the beast. At the same time, a storm of drones descended, each armed with blasters capable of vaporizing flesh. They weren't meant for Shadowfang. They were meant for Elias. Bolts seared the sand at his feet, one clipping his arm and burning flesh. He fell, rolled, tried to rise, but there were too many. Above, Shadowfang slammed against the field, claws sparking against the invisible barrier, roaring so loud it drowned the weapon's fire. The predator was a storm incarnate, throwing its entire body against the prison, but the barrier held. Elias staggered, chest heaving, and looked up at Shadowfang. He said nothing, he didn't need to. His eyes carried the plea, the command, the trust. Shadowfang's muscles bunched, its rage sharpened to a single point, and with a guttural cry it did the impossible. The predator tore through the containment field, shredding energy with raw will, body seared but unyielding. It hit the arena floor like a meteor, crushing drones beneath its weight, jaws snapping in fury. The crowd screamed, guards scrambled, but all Elias saw was the moment Shadowfang crouched protectively around him, shielding him from every strike until the last drone lay broken. Silence fell heavy and absolute. The predator's hide smoked from burns, Elias's arm bled freely, but neither moved except to steady the other. Man and beast, broken yet unbowed, stood at the center of the galaxy's judgment. The Chancellor rose, his voice trembling for the first time. This cannot be. The apex predator yields to no one. Elias shook his head. You're right. He doesn't yield. He chooses. The words cut deeper than any weapon. Around the chamber, counselors whispered, argued, panicked. If the predator chose a human, what did that mean for the balance of power? What did it mean for their centuries of failed hunts, for their fleets shattered against worlds the predator wandered? The truth was undeniable, and the terror of it washed over them all. Elias stepped forward, his voice carrying with quiet fire. You called him a nightmare. But maybe the nightmare was yours all along, the fear that something greater than you could exist beyond your control. You fear what you can't dominate. But I don't. I accept it. And because of that, he walks with me. Shadowfang lowered its massive head, brushing against Elias's uninjured side with surprising gentleness, as if to underline the point. The crowd erupted again, but this time it wasn't uniform. Some cheered, enthralled by the spectacle. Others shrieked for annihilation. The chamber split, factions revealed in the space of heartbeats. The Chancellor slammed a clawed hand against the dais. Enough. This council cannot be divided. The human and his beast are a threat to every star under our dominion. He raised his arm, ready to signal the guards for execution. Shadowfang's hackles rose, claws carving furrows in the arena floor. Elias's hand tightened on its hide. He could feel the predator's instinct. One lunge, one strike, and the Chancellor would be ash. But he whispered low, words only the beast could hear. Not today. Not like this. And Shadowfang stilled. The Chancellor froze, his authority unraveling in the silence that followed. The guards hesitated, uncertain. For the second time in minutes, the predator had chosen peace at Elias's word. That choice struck harder than violence ever could. The chamber dissolved into uproar, and amidst it, Elias understood the truth. Whether the council condemned him or not, the galaxy had already changed. Fear had met its match, not in conquest but in trust. The predator had chosen humanity, and humanity had chosen it back. That bond could not be erased. As guards dragged him and Shadowfang away, shouts echoing behind them, Elias smiled through the pain. Whatever came next, execution, exile, war, he and his companion would face it together. The galaxy could shudder, councils could rage, but in the end, the universe's deadliest predator had laid its loyalty at the feet of a human. And that truth would spread faster than any verdict.